Hi all, welcome back to Make More Bonsai, John here. We're going to explore something super fun in this video. It's a popular bonsai species for sure, mostly because it starts out already looking like a little tree to begin with, even before any formal bonsai training. I'm talking about the Kingsville Boxwood. Boxwoods are native to Europe and Asia and I think Africa, and are used all over as a hedge or a decorative shrub. Their dense foliage and small leaves bring a texture to a garden. This particular variety, the Kingsville Boxwood, is a mutant, a genetic anomaly that actually made the leaves even smaller and the foliage denser than the parent plant. This was cultivated into stable production at a nursery in Kingsville, Maryland in the early 1910s. The botanical name Buxus microphylla compacta, Kingsville, kinda makes sense now with that bit of history. Microphylla literally means small leaves, which kinda translates to chef's kiss in the world of bonsai. This super slow growing tiny leaf plant really didn't get popular until bonsai addicts caught wind of it in the early 1960s. Since then, bonsai cultivation elevated this tree to superstardom. Let's explore some options and some training methods that can help us get the most bonsai we can for the time it takes for these slow growing trees to respond and show us results. A very popular way to train a Kingsville Boxwood is to more or less prune off anything that isn't contributing to the design, allow it to grow, and repeat. The tree itself will guide the style since it is such a slow-growing species. Traditional training methods kind of take a long time to arrive at a specific style you might have in mind. It is possible to do that, and we will explore that a little later. For right now, let's just play with one tree and find out together what this tree has to offer. Part of the fun of working with the Kingsville Boxwood is an element of treasure hunting. Right away, this 10-year-old, that's right, 10 years old and barely 9 inches tall, it already kinda looks good, so this should be some good clean fun. Some more background on the Kingsville Boxwood while this tree gets opened up a bit. Boxwood have small round or oval leaves that are grouped closely together that create a dense globular plant. The leaf buds appear opposite each other. That combined with their compactedness make it appear extra dense. The opposite buds are really useful to fill in an area or to help build asymmetry by offering options to remove one side to create an alternating branch structure and ramification on a very small scale. They have an aggressive root system and do need some space in a pot to be successful as a bonsai. They prefer even moisture and moderate sun. Too much sun will cause the leaves to yellow. The branches are stiff and brittle. Wiring can be problematic because of this. It's very common to have a branch just snap with no warning, so most folks limit wiring and favor directional pruning. If left to its own devices, it'll spread out a little wider than it is tall in an ever-expanding halo of leaves around extending branches and trunks from its base. This particular tree started as a rooted cutting that was kind of left alone to grow out. The only attention it received was every few years it would outgrow the pot, so it would be transplanted into a slightly larger pot. That's it, for the last decade. Using some standard bonsai pruning techniques such as removing any growth that resides on the bottom of a branch, pruning off any growth that is growing straight up or looking weak, prune any short buds that are between branches that won't contribute anything to a design, and look for opportunities to create asymmetry by removing opposite branches, all the while exposing the trunk and surface roots and creating some space for air to circulate and light to penetrate into the tree. The Kingsville Boxwood maybe grows 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch per year, which is pretty slow. Ridiculously slow, really, but that does have its advantages. For example, the bonsai will retain its shape and design for much, much longer than a more aggressive species like maple or an elm, which have the potential to grow out of a design in a matter of weeks. A Kingsville Boxwood will be a very consistent looking tree in your collection, always ready to show off in whatever the milieu, from a yoga studio or a family portrait, or if you're an evil corporate magnate, you can park it right on your desk as you manipulate market destinies, like is often seen in movies. I may just be attuned to noticing this when watching a movie, but the bad guy often seems to have a bonsai in his office. Even with all these weird and difficult traits, the positive attributes of the small leaves, dense branches, and bark texture make Kingsville Boxwood an awesome tree for bonsai. Already this one is starting to look like an attractive little tree, and this is the very first attempt to apply any pruning or styling. After working on the tree for a really short time, we can see why this species is so popular. It already evokes a feeling of being a huge tree captured in miniature. with that fine textured bark combined with the tight arrangement of branches, all without 5 years of reduction pruning to create ramification like so many other species require to look as refined. If we take a closer look and zoom into the base of the trunk, it has a dense network of branches that feels like a huge tree. Let's take a look at what tree this really resembles and draw some inspiration from the real world. Well, real as in the actual size world, examples of a tree that has similar attributes. When I lived in New York, options were somewhat limited to model this type of growth against. Trees tend to be taller and not as widespread. The cooler climate and mild wind contributed to that aspect. Only after I moved south and spent some time in Texas did I encounter a tree that this model clicks so well in my head to offer any clarity to envision this design against. I'm talking about the southern live oak, Quercus virginiana. Native to Texas, Louisiana, and California, I think, the live oak can grow extraordinarily wide expanses of huge branches that are low to the ground, that stretch out like they're trying to hug the earth, and long branches that twist and warp into complex curves. They also attain a great height with a canopy of dense branches throughout. Seeing photos and even walking or driving past them wasn't enough for me. I needed to live among them to really take in the complexity these trees grow and build themselves into over decades of weather extremes they punch through. As their branches get sheared off by the wind or the heat desiccates the new growth, these trees don't slowly decline into dormancy like they do further north, where over a month or two in late autumn, all the moisture within the tree will recede deep into the tree to prevent freezing that causes water to expand and destroy the cell structure of the leaves and branches. The trees are more active in the south, so the water is still circulating inside the branches. So when a sudden deep freeze happens, the water expands rapidly and kills off sections of a branch. And sometimes the pressure of the expansion can be so strong a branch or even a whole tree will explode to release that pressure. Seriously, it sounds like fireworks, and a branch will just drop off a tree. That combined with hurricanes and tornadoes just tearing limbs off, the bigger the tree, the less flexible it becomes, so these branches reach a tensile limit and simply break off. The result of all this activity is replacement growth that abruptly changes direction from the previous growth that had broken off. It creates a network of branches with ever-changing directions. In this example, you can see once there was a longer branch there, then it was severed by nature and a new one took over. Even that was broken off, so this one took over, and so on and so on and so on. Here's another example. An entire tree that has endured multiple nature-provided pruning sessions, it has regrown rapidly with all new directions and groovy undulating patterns. Let's illustrate this a bit more in detail, not only because it applies to Kingsville Boxwood or trying to emulate a live oak look and feel, but because this is actually a really great visual device that will help illustrate age in almost any bonsai, especially deciduous species, but works well with pine and other evergreens. It's a really useful way to tell a story of a branch on a tree without needing to be all verbose. The picture is worth 1,000 words. Let's consider a tree's branch evolution over time. A primary branch emerges from the trunk, and from it, a few secondary branches also develop. Over time, one of those branches meet an untimely demise. The remaining branch takes over as a new primary branch with a directional change that reflects the location of the secondary branch that took over. This also can occur on a secondary branch and beyond as well, ultimately creating a series of branches that abruptly change direction after the surviving portions take over the job of filling an area with leaves to collect light. Over the course of decades, the branch structure can experience any number of hardships that cause the branch on a tree to be shed. The overall silhouette of a tree will also change over time, expanding and contracting with the size and length of branches as they evolve. Within the size range of a bonsai, one can encourage this kind of branch construction with some strategic pruning, creating a kind of abrupt end of a branch that is followed by a small arc of the secondary branch takeover. This can be deployed within the bonsai to communicate this type of branch development, to illustrate age and add a natural look and feel to the tree. When an opportunity arises to use this in a design, it can really enhance the story of your bonsai, and it doesn't need to be visible on every branch. The randomness and inconsistency of its appearance also communicates the natural occurrence over time within the bonsai. The Kingsville Boxwood evokes a very similar vibe, all by itself, and the very small internodes make it an easy species to create this look and feel. With all that in mind, maybe you look for opportunities to emulate this natural phenomenon through intentional pruning when designing the branch structure of your bonsai. Let's part these ideas in our brains when spending some time with other Kingsville Boxwood examples, but this time with some very intentional design concepts in mind. This little tree is about 7 years old from a cutting. For this tree, I want to kind of escape the find the bonsai treasure hunt that the previous example was. In this case, we are definitely taking the very long way around. The plan for this tree is to create a very typical informal upright design approach. A single trunk with defined branches and a single apex. For that to happen, choices need to be made that eliminate a lot of extra growth to focus energy distribution to specific places to develop the desired outcome. For this to be successful, it will need a trunk with some height to it that also has some attractive width to the base and an exaggerated taper as it ascends to the apex. 2 years ago, a main line to the trunk was decided and everything else was pruned off for energy to be devoted to building upon that initial structure. This is the result of that. Another interesting thing happened on the way here, and it's kind of unpredictable, but can act as a cheat code for this super slow growing species. Remember when I said the Kingsville Boxwood was a mutant? The small leaves and compact nature is a genetic anomaly that is kind of unstable. The timing and amount of foliage I removed when I first pruned it 2 years ago triggered what's called reversion. The new growth ignored the mutation aspect and reverted to its original genetic programming of a Japanese boxwood. The new growth was way more aggressive and much faster than the mutant genetic programming. So long extensions with larger foliage was produced. This extended the trunk, making it gain some height and fatten the trunk much faster due to the increased demand of the faster growth. Usually, when you see this reversion to its original genetic form, it should be pruned off. It will compete with the other preferred foliage type and eventually take over and become the original non-mutant plant. Okay, so what triggers this? First, it was triggered by the sheer amount of foliage I removed initially. This caused the tree to react quickly to recover the lost energy production the leaves provide. It produced new buds in a hurry and they extended quickly to make up for the deficit. Second was the timing of the pruning. I pruned this back in spring as it was producing new growth. This kind of forced it to react quickly as it was actively growing. The day length and seasonal activity was all indicating to the tree to keep making more foliage, so it didn't hesitate to not waste any time forming mutant buds it would normally produce, and produced a few more active buds that extended as the original form of the boxwood. This is something that can't be relied upon, however. In general, any styling and pruning should be performed in late fall or late winter on a Kingsville boxwood. This allows the tree to develop buds over time to prepare for spring. These new buds will maintain the mutation and decrease the chance for reversion. By performing the hard pruning in spring, it increased the chance for this reversion. I was prepared for this tree to just slowly develop, but since the timing increased the chance for reversion, it presented the opportunity to exploit this over the following summer. So great, now there's this big old honkin' reverted branch growing on my nice tiny Kingsville boxwood. The question is, can we get it back to the mutant foliage type we all know and love? The answer is, we can definitely increase the chance of the mutation returning, so yes-ish. Allow that reverted branch to extend and do its thing for the rest of the year. Enjoy the accelerated development as it increases vascular activity that fattens the trunk and improves the trunk taper. Then, when it's late fall or late winter, when normally one would be pruning and styling, we can eliminate the auxin hormone that resides at the tip of the branch by pruning that tip if you want to preserve the branch, or remove the whole branch if you don't want to keep it. Now, as new buds form over winter and early spring, the mutation has a chance to regain dominance and begin to produce Kingsville Boxwood leaves again. Now, I know this is sort of weird. It reeks of mad scientist vibes, but it is a tool that can be used in this particular species that can lead to satisfying bonsai. And let's face it, we're already doing mad scientist stuff anyways when growing bonsai, so embrace the weird and practice that mad scientist laugh while you're at it. I'll wait. Great, so moving on. We can see from this example that this opportunity worked out pretty well. All that's left is to continue to prune to direct energy to the portions of the tree that will support the design concept. Let's go further down that path on a more advanced example of what we've been discussing. Intentional design combined with genetic exploitation and working toward that live oak model all at once. This example is a bit older, maybe 12 or 13 years old, and about 5 years into the concept. A wide spread of low branches have been developed upon a single trunk to push forward the live oak-inspired model, and the height has been encouraged with some hard pruning in early spring to direct energy to extending that trunk a little higher. And, will you look at that? The top part has reverted and started extending, almost doubling the height of the tree. You can see the distance between the leaves is about half an inch and is starting to branch out. The time of year currently is late summer, and it's time to clean things up a bit to let some air circulate and also remove some growth that is less than ideal so the tree can continue to direct energy to the desired branches. I'm removing anything that has grown downwards and also looking for opportunities to prune off growth that will help display the way branches develop on live oaks in that undulating fashion replacement growth has when a large branch breaks and a smaller one takes over in a different direction. There is a branch midway up that is a likely candidate for that, and the branch below it already has another opportunity as well. I'm going to focus on some minor cleaning to open things up for next year. I plan to transplant this tree into a bonsai pot before next spring, so some light cleaning will help with that process. This is a great opportunity to talk a little bit about pruning Kingsville Boxwood. This tree has a really fine bark texture. It is a feature of the species that really helps reinforce the illusion of a large tree, but, small. One thing does, however, interrupt the full immersion into the tiny tree world, and that's that circular callus collar that is formed when a branch is removed. It contrasts with the texture when there's a symmetrical wound against it. On a juniper or a pine, we mitigate that collar by breaking a branch and creating a jin and shari to limit the evidence of our mechanical manipulation. Jins on a boxwood really don't stand out since the bark has a light color, so not a lot of contrast there. So what to do? With a slight cut on the top to start the removal of the branch, the rest can be torn off to leave an irregular wound behind to then heal and leave an irregular scar on the branch or trunk that will harmonize and look more natural. After this cleanup pruning, we can see that lower branch on the left now has the look of a replacement branch like we see on the live oak now that this session is finished. So let's fast forward to early spring. 6 weeks earlier, it was repotted into a bonsai container, and it's already starting to produce new growth. The pot is kinda deep, and this is intentional to allow room for roots to grow and to accommodate the final design, which will be a bit wider. I went with that earthy red color and texture on the pot to kind of reflect the general Texas landscape of sandy limestone that really contrasts well with the glossy deep green leaves. We can see that after removing the apical bud from the extension that had reverted has already begun to produce the smaller leaves of the Kingsville Boxwood. If we take a closer look, the buds are all showing the preferred compactness and are emerging in tiny clumps instead of half-inch long extensions. I will continue to monitor the unreversion process throughout the rest of the year and prune off anything that isn't conforming to push back on the reversion if needed. With evidence of health and vigor all over the place, it's time to push this design concept a little further. To continue the work started the year before, I'm removing any unwanted growth and looking for more opportunities to emulate the live oak look to the branches. Also, let's see if we can guide some of that new growth on the top with some wire. These upper branches were created by a reversion, which means its structure is more like a Japanese boxwood than the really stiff Kingsville branches. They're still kind of soft and green, which means we can apply some wire and maybe gain some control over the direction of the branches. Branches on a Kingsville boxwood are really stiff and tough to wire, mostly because they break without warning. However, in early spring, when there's so much activity flowing through the branches, they get slightly less stiff and somewhat easier to bend successfully. Let's take advantage of every opportunity to push the design forward when we can, and this is an ideal time to use wire to make some progress. I'm going to use aluminum wire on these since it's softer than copper and easier to apply without breaking the branch. We can begin to form the structure of a rough outline of an apex and still work to maintain some live oak spirit by lowering that extended branch a bit to harmonize with the trunk direction. I'm deliberately leaving it as long as it is right now for two reasons. A, I want to keep as much vascular activity flowing upwards into it as possible. The more foliage it has, the greater the demand, all with the goal to better develop this area throughout the growing season. And two, I want to see if I can take advantage of an opportunity to further enhance the live oakness by seeing if it makes sense to create a wider top canopy that one sees on live oaks, or if that isn't working, simply prune it back to a more informal upright bonsai design. Both options are attractive to me right now. I can make that call later in the year after things develop over the summer. Whichever direction it takes, over time, the dense foliage will fill in and create a full and fairly wide crown that is typical of a live oak. Kingsville Boxwood does take its time developing for bonsai, so may as well enjoy the ride in this case rather than make hasty decisions that can limit options. We covered a lot of stuff talking about Kingsville Boxwood. Its humble origins, the super slow growth habit that caught the eye of bonsai folks, the treasure hunt when you begin initial styling, mutation and reversion and remutation, is that even a thing? Intentional design choices and techniques that maybe try to accelerate development, winter pruning for tighter bud formation, late spring pruning that can encourage longer extensions from reversion, how to make better looking pruning scars. That is a lot of things to consider to help pass the considerable time it takes for these trees to grow. I hope you get the chance to give a few of these concepts a try. Thanks for watching. I hope you gained some helpful insights from this little video. Maybe like and subscribe and leave a comment below, and possibly check out the book or the t-shirt and hat links in the Show More section. There's even like a super thanks option available as well. Special thanks to everyone who chose to champion this channel with that little heart button. Your participation and support really helps energize this little production and helps me dream up new stuff to show you, because bonsai stuff is kinda cool, and so are you for helping support this channel.